to share something with you. That might put me in a very negative light, yeah.
Relationships are not my forte.
See if someone grabbed up my wife or something, completely different ballgame.
I'll walk away from here, and this has been like a therapy session.
This is Kugan Cassius for IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. Do you remember? I actually remember, you will probably remember, when Fury fought Chisora in the rematch, and they did it in the cinema. We're back in the cinema here now. Adam Smith, how are you, first of all?
I'm really good. I'm really excited about today. It's a different press conference setup, and that's great because boxers are innovating and trying different things out, which is fantastic. And we have to, 5 weeks on from the fight night, obviously, that never happened at the O2 on September the 10th, and we go again. So, and it was the press conference this time 5 weeks ago where there were 3 press conferences. It was really engaging stuff. We had the undercard, the Olympians, and then obviously the main protagonists, and real fun and fireworks. And then, of course, we came off the dais and had the terribly sad news that the Queen had been taken ill, and subsequently, obviously, the nation stopped. So the board, I always felt, made the right decision that week. It was very difficult for the fighters, but they took it extremely professionally. And as you know, it's a sport like no other, and you're focused for that one moment, and obviously there's making weight and everything else. But they were brilliant. They understood it. The nation mourned for 10 days, and rightfully Robert Smith made the decision to call boxing off for that weekend. And I think it would have been difficult to continue because, of course, the nation was reflecting. There was huge amounts going on, and I think in everybody's lives. And this is a celebration, Coogan, this week. This is the first time ever that there's been an all-female card in the UK. It's something many of us have wanted for a long time. Many of us who have advocated women's boxing. We had Savannah Marshall as a scholar back in 2012. Katie Taylor turned professional in 2016 with Eddie and Matchroom and us. And we've had the likes of Terry Harper and Chantel Cameron and obviously Tasha and everybody come through. And it's been a wonderful boom for women's boxing, and at a time where women's sport is absolutely flying with the Lionesses, the cricket, the rugby, the netball, everything else, it's time for our elite athletes to have their moment, their stage. And I think this is a pivotal moment for women's sport. Not only have we got a huge fight with Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall, 10 years in the making, the rematch from that fight in May 2012 where, Savannah inflicted the only defeat on Clarissa in 78 amateur fights and 12 professional fights, and they meet again. So that's got everything. So too has the chief support, the co-main event with Michaela Mayer and Alicia Baumgardner. No love lost there. Another unification, more world title fights on the line. And then you look at the stacked card featuring the greatest talent we've got, and it was brilliant that we signed Caroline Dubois. Fantastic. I pushed Ben Shalom extremely hard to sign the dynamic duo of Lauren Price and Caris Artingstall, who I think are going to go, do huge things, not only in boxing but in sport generally. And I think it's a real stage for them. You had April Hunter, you had Shannon Ryan, you had Georgia O'Connor, and so many others. Ebony Jones. It's fantastic. I think it's wonderful for us all to be celebrating something this week, and what has been a difficult couple of weeks in boxing. Let's not hide away from that. It's been really difficult for us all, whether we were involved or weren't, and to see the pages dominated in the papers by bad moments for boxing. It's good to be able to hopefully have a fresh new week and celebrate something this week. And it's great that Matchroom, who obviously had a difficult week last week, are here. I've seen Frank Smith. I know Eddie's in Australia, but they're here for Alicia Baumgardner. We've got Todd DeBerth over for Michaela Mayer, Dimitri Salita with Clarissa. It's almost like all promoters are coming together. So let's hope that we get a really smooth build-up this week. I'm sure we will. And on Saturday night, we have an epic night, and a night that will change things for women's sport. That's what we're here to try and do.
Let's kind of track back, because it's not fashionable anymore to give credit to anyone, but I will say that the fact that you managed to, within the space of 4 or 5 weeks, secure a date for all these girls from kind of what happened, which was out of everyone's control with the passing away, the sad passing away of the Queen. But you moved very quickly to secure a date for the 15th of October, which is this Saturday. which is not really known, that kind of short time space with venues and just kind of a lot of fighters were based in America, etc. The whole logistics around it, you did very well to actually get that show so quickly on, which is taking place this Saturday at the O2.
Yeah, I was trying to think of other shows that have been sort of rescheduled, and people were saying, have you been as excited for something that's happening second time round? And of course, I've been involved, as you have, Coogan, for many years in this sport, and we've had real difficulties. We've had OBs being called off at the last minute because we had indoor water in Middlesbrough. We had lights go out, I remember, at Elephant and Castle in the middle of a David Starry fight. We've had fighters not come out of changing rooms for various reasons. We've had all sorts of things and hiccups and difficulties to overcome sort of in the last few hours, but actually to sort of call a show off or postpone it and then redo it just 5 weeks later with every single sort of female fighter back. I mean, all the fights are holding together. That's nothing to do with me. That's testament to the promoters, managers, trainers, and the fighters themselves who are so gung-ho on this event happening. I think that's the important thing. Caroline Dubois told me yesterday she had to be on this event before and again. There was no way she wasn't going to be. She's like, even if I'm not feeling 100, I've got to be on this card. And I think Lauren and Karis, for example, don't want to fight on the same night. They want to take their careers in slightly different directions, with them supporting each other at ringside on different nights. So one of the agreements was that Lauren and Karis wouldn't fight on the same night. They are, because they realise the importance of what was September the 10th, but is now October the 15th. So I say hats off to everybody that's worked so hard to put this on, this brilliant event on together with so many different promoters, and the fact that all the fighters wanted to come back and complete what they started. I think that's a terrific testament to everybody involved.
Normally, like I said, we are talking about the main event, and the main event this week, rightfully so, but the co-main event, which equally could have been a main event between, as you mentioned, between Mayer and Baumgardner. I mean, these girls generally don't like each other, and they're two kind of the best fighters in the sport, regardless of men and women. We're just talking about two great fighters. That's a solid main and co-main there.
And they're two great young ladies, full of character, and they're so nice. It's amazing that they've just sparked off each other this fuel, this dislike, this lack of respect, because actually you take them individually. I mean, I've commentated with Michaela. She's absolutely brilliant in that department, by the way. I think she's going to be a superstar way beyond boxing. And as for Alicia, she is, I've got to know her, obviously, 5 weeks ago and this week, and she's fabulous, absolutely brilliant. They both are. But they've got this the wrong chemistry, haven't they? Which is just lighting the fire for a fight that doesn't really need any selling. It's a wonderful unification at super featherweight, and it's got a terrific clash of styles. Is Michaela slightly tight at the weight? We know she wants to move up. Is she a little bit technically better than Alicia, who came over, of course, into the backyard of Terry Harper and of course that stunning victory. So I'm really looking forward to that fight. I like both of them, and I like personalities. And you know me, Coogan, I like stories in boxing, in sport generally. And I think this is a great story, as is the main event between Clarissa and Savannah, which obviously we've known about since 2012 when we first took Savannah on as a Sky Scholar. And it was just after, not only had she beaten Clarissa, but then she froze. She didn't go on to do anything at the Olympics, and it was a terrible event for her, and it took 2 or 3 years to build her confidence back. And then obviously Peter Fury has injected a whole new life to Savannah, and a belief in her talent, and she's a completely different person these days, and it's fantastic to see. So with that confidence, that power and that skill set against the wonderful Gwoat Clarissa Shields, who's got incredible personality, charisma, qualities. She's a wonderful, wonderful athlete, and she's got everything to win this fight on Saturday, but then so too is Savannah. So I cannot wait. They're two fights you can't pick, and you're right, they could have topped any event anywhere around the world, either of them.
Right, stick it on you now with a difficult question here. Who's the best female fighter in the world? Is it Clarissa Shields or is it Katie Taylor?
I've got to go with Katie Taylor. I mean, I have a very big soft spot for Katie Taylor. She's a friend of ours, as well as obviously somebody that I've worked with and followed for a long time. Obviously, she went off to to work on DAZN and with Matchroom and Eddie, and I'm hoping I can get to the fight night at Wembley on October the 29th. I think that she is a phenomenon. Katie Taylor, for what she's done for women's boxing, full stop. I think because of the longevity of her, Clarissa has been unbelievable, so too Amanda Serrano, so too Tasha Jonas, so too many others. And it's a very difficult question to answer, just like who's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. You thought for many years, for me, it was Floyd Mayweather. Now people are saying, is it Canelo? Is it Spence? Is it Crawford? Is it Usyk? Who is?
Spencer Oliver.
Spencer Oliver, maybe not. Is it Spence? Is it Crawford? Is it, who's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world? It's almost like who's the best female fighter. It's a very difficult one to answer. They're totally different weight divisions, and Clarissa Shields has been incredible for the sport. Only that one defeat, a multiple weight world champion. And if she goes on and beats Savannah and retires undefeated, she'd always believe she's the GOAT. For me, Katie Taylor did so much in the amateurs, and maybe that's having seen that and seen the developments in Ireland. But to be a 5-time world champion, a 6-time European champion, carry the flag for Ireland. I think, when she started, it was she had to dress up as a boy. She was Kay Taylor for 2 years. It's an unbelievable story, Katie Taylor's story, and she's still going from strength to strength. So I narrowly say Katie, and Clarissa might not talk to me after that for this, but I'm a huge admirer of Clarissa Shields, but also not only what she does in the ring, Clarissa, what she stands for in life. I think she's she's an advocate of Flint, Michigan. She is a role model. She's had an incredibly difficult upbringing, and she found boxing and she found a way. But a double Olympic champion and a multi-time world champion, she is arguably GOAT and the best, and I can see why people say that. But for me, the Katie Taylor journey, and maybe it's because I've been slightly closer to it, is still something which I think is just unbelievable.
Well, one thing I will say, we're talking about Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields there, but someone that will be definitely aiming to put themselves in the mix will be Savannah Marshall this week. She'll be looking to dethrone Clarissa Shields, and she's up for it. She was up for it back in September, and she'll be up for it this weekend.
Savannah Marshall and Tasha Jonas have been wonderful additions for Boxer and for Sky in the last year. Look at what Tasha's done, winning a world title and then unifying, and now she's going for a third. It's incredible, and she's doing so much great work as well behind the scenes for Sky and in commentary. Savannah Marshall, Sky go back with her a huge amount of time, and I'm just really proud of her. I think she's developed that confidence, that talent that I knew she always had, but she's done it. She did it the hard way. She went out to America. She had some time with Floyd Mayweather in Vegas, and she took herself out of her comfort zone. She then hooked up with Peter Fury, and I think that's sometimes there's just a chemistry. There's a match made in heaven between, a trainer and a fighter, and sometimes it's you're born with that. It's genetics, like it was with Joe and Enzo Calzaghe. But I think with Peter and Savannah, there's an understanding there. It's almost like not only is he a trainer, but he's like an older brother or a father figure who's so calm in the corner. And it's almost like, I think this is really important for this particular fight. If Savannah Marshall pulls it off and becomes the undisputed middleweight champion, it will be an unbelievable story as well for a girl that had to fight her way through Hartlepool, through the boxing club there. But I think she needs Peter Fury in this fight. She needed him in the Hannah Rankin fight. That was her breakthrough night, and I was worried about those first 2 or 3 rounds. And with in the old days, in the amateur days, when she had frozen in the Olympics, she'd go to an amateur tournament, Coogan, and she would sometimes get beaten in the first round. Or if she got through that first round, she'd go on and win it, or she'd medal. And it was like, what is the difference? How do you do that? What is the confidence? What is the mindset? And I think sometimes with Savannah, it's about how she starts a fight. I think it's different now. She's got a different self-belief. I think she believes she can beat Clarissa Shields. She's done it in the amateurs. I think she's absolutely, totally confident that she wins on Saturday night. But for me, it's about the start. I think if Clarissa gets a really good start, which I expect her to, it's about how Peter and Savannah deal with that. 20 minutes is a short time in boxing. A lot of the women want three-minute rounds. It's not happening. They're 10-2s. If Clarissa gets off to a very good start, what you don't want to happen is Savannah to get low in the corner and that confidence. So Peter's got a very important job. We all think it will be a fight of two halves. That Clarissa will probably have the better half of the first part of the fight, and Savannah the second half. But who knows? Savannah's the biggest punching female on the planet, in my opinion. Clarissa is arguably the most skillful. She's a phenomenon in her own right, and she's a master at around these weight classes. She's fabulous. So it's a 50-50 fight, and I'm hoping that there's a rematch and a trilogy if it's as good as we expect it to be, Coogan.
Not long to find out. Adam, I do want to touch on obviously what you mentioned. There's a bit of a bleak week for British boxing last week with the situation regarding Conor Benn's failed drug tests, which subsequently ended kind of the fight, the fight not happening, shall we say, between him and Chris Eubank. First of all, would you say that was the right call in the end from whoever made that call, that fight did not take place on Saturday night last week?
Absolutely, and we go back to the week before, or the 2 or 3 weeks before, when we had all the back and forth with Fury and AJ, and obviously a different week last week, but it's not been a great time for boxing, and everybody knows that. I picked up Boxing News this morning, and it's sad to read, and it's just difficult to sort of fathom it all out and understand it, because there's just so much involved in all of this. It's a difficult sport, it's a political sport, everybody's got their own business in this sport. And I take you back to the week before with Fury and AJ, and we have it wasn't going to be a Sky fight, it was going to be a BT and DAZN fight. And I, for one, was really excited about that fight coming off. I knew that Tyson wanted the fight, I knew that Anthony wanted the fight. And although I wasn't directly involved, I was certainly very much for, if there's any way I could sort of help and try and make a fight that the fans wanted. Obviously it wasn't down to me, but ultimately that was a disappointment for me. I would love to have seen that fight happen. It looks like Fury fights Chisora and AJ fights either in December or in the new year, and they'll go different routes again. And for the fans that's disappointing, and for the fighters that's disappointing, because they both wanted it. But I understand there's different the different viewpoints from managers, trainers, promoters. Everyone's got, and I wasn't involved in the contractual sort of back and forth. I heard things, and I was hoping that that there was time limits, and ultimately that didn't happen, and I felt really disappointed with that. And then to have last week, I was really excited about the fight. Obviously there was a lot about the weight difference, and Spencer Oliver's been very vocal about the fact that he felt Chris probably shouldn't be coming down to 157, but that was part of the deal, that he would come down slightly and Conor would come up. And when the fight was first announced, and I saw Conor a few weeks back, and I saw Chris. When the fight was first announced, I thought, wow, it's a big test this for Conor Benn, and I'd have Chris a favourite because of the experience and the skill set and the size. But they made the weight conditions. I wondered sort of how the board would find that, how they'd move along with it. But obviously the fight was announced. It was a fight I'd love to have had on Sky, let's be honest, and it was a fight that I think Eddie and Calla did a great job of actually making, and it got everybody talking again. And it's we can be very close to the trade and talk about fights week in, week out, and the development of boxers, but ultimately you do need every once in a while a fight that catapults the casuals into it, and whether that's a Fury AJ or it's a Eubank and Benn scenario, and we all grew up on those fights, and we all had our favourites, and that's history and legacy, and it was an incredible sort of almost like fantasy fight that became reality. So I think for both Fury and AJ not to happen, and then Eubank and Benn not to happen for different reasons, was really disappointing. As far as the developments last week, I was a fan. I was going to the fight with my son. He just had his 15th birthday. He was really excited about it. And I came back from the office. He came back from school and he said, "Dad, I hear that Conor Benn has failed the test. That means the fight's off." And I said, "Well, I think so, but they're not calling it off yet, so we don't know. We wait and see. It's not my fight, so ultimately it's their decision about whether they go on for it, so I don't know." And he said, "But you can't have the fight because one of them's failed the drugs test, and whether he's guilty or not, we don't know. I suppose there's going to be an investigation." This is my son talking. "There's going to be an investigation. I guess he'll have a right to plead his innocence or guilt." And I thought, yes, absolutely, there's a process to go through. But he said, "But if he's failed a test, Chris can't fight him because it won't be fair." I mean, that's sort of a 15-year-old view, a simplistic way of going about it the fight can't happen. And that's sort of, I think, what we all felt, that the fight couldn't happen at that point. Did we want it as fans to happen? Did I want to be at the O2, with 20,000 people seeing it? Everybody wanted to. And that's, I think, why we were so disappointed that it wasn't going to happen. The board made absolutely the right call, and the promoters eventually made the right call too. The fight couldn't go ahead. Like it couldn't go ahead 5 weeks ago with the women for different reasons, and shouldn't have gone ahead, and it didn't. It couldn't have gone ahead last week, and sense prevailed in the end. But it was very difficult to watch it all unfold from afar. I've worked with Conor Benn since he was very young, and I like him very much, and I like Chris very much. And it was very difficult to get your head around it, because I was very surprised when I heard that he'd failed a drugs test. I wouldn't have just, it was a real shock. I can't comment, Coogan, on those tests. I wasn't involved. I'm not involved. That is something for VADA, UCAD, the board, the promoters, the lawyers, everybody. Conor Benn has obviously come out. He's messaged me. He said, I'm very diligent about what I take, and I will, I'll prove that this will all be proved that it's not what it looks like. But he's failed a drugs test, and ultimately that stops the fight, and you've got to try and get to the bottom of it. It's a very difficult situation. It was a bad week for boxing, and I feel for everybody involved. But obviously we hope for better times going forward, starting with this week, where we need something good to happen in boxing, and I think it will on Saturday night.
Adam, I will refer to a situation, not similar, but a situation that you were in, but I suppose Matthew and Sky were in 2019, with the situation regarding Dillian Whyte, who, after what we're talking about regarding Oscar Rivas, was subsequently cleared of all charges, or whatever kind of things were against him, were cleared a few months after. But that fight did go ahead on the night. We didn't actually learn, and when I say we, I don't know who we is, but the public obviously didn't learn about that situation until the week after the fight. So could you make comment on that?
Yeah, and I think, first of all, before that, you said that Dillian was cleared of everything, and ultimately that's what Conor believes he's going to be. So we can't really get involved until that process all happens. I mean, a lot of people are saying, obviously, ban him or this or that or whatever. But ultimately, I don't know. I'm not an expert, and it's the board and the VADA and UCAD. It's their situation to sort out with the promoters. What I do know is that there is no place for drugs in this sport, and that I think everybody is in universal agreement. That's why Spencer Oliver's so passionate at the moment about the fact that he nearly died in the ring with dehydration. So he was looking at the sort of Chris Eubank weight-making thing, and he's saying that if you've got drugs in your system as well, then this is extraordinarily dangerous sport. I think drugs have no place in any sport, full stop. There have to have clean athletes everywhere. But in boxing, it's horrendous if you think that. There is no time and no place. But as you said, Dillian got cleared after that. The fight went ahead because the board are the governing body in the country. The board decided last week that they were going to prohibit it. There was rumours that it would go to Luxembourg and other things. Thankfully, Eddie and Callum made the right decision. It didn't happen, and that was right. And as far as I'm concerned, looking back at the Whyte Rivas situation, the board had the fight go on. We covered the fight. I think it was Thomas Hauser who broke the story the week afterwards, and then it got dealt with. So, and ultimately Dillian was found innocent, and that's that. So, yeah, ultimately we look to the board at every single time, whether if there's a situation that occurs, and it's often not one that we as broadcasters get involved in, or some promoters obviously have to. I mean, for example, I think the emails or the test results would have gone to the board and the promoters of Conor Benn, and they would have decided, or they did decide, how that process went ahead. And when that story came out from the Daily Mail, and then it all obviously exploded onto everyone's scene. But ultimately, sense prevailed. The board made the right decision, and the promoters pulled the fight, and there was no other commission. So the board allowed the fights to go on. That's what we are. We're broadcasters. We're not governing bodies, Coogan. Ultimately, the British board decide when they find something out, if there's adverse findings, if there's whatever, they make a decision about whether that event goes ahead, not the broadcasters or the promoters. The board do, and the promoters actually this time listened to the board, or they didn't go into another commission, and that was the right decision as well, I thought. So, yeah, the fact that people found out after White Rivas, what I think was Thomas Hauser said, then obviously there was an investigation, but no, the board allowed that fight to go ahead. And with the board, Robert Smith, the General Secretary, who does such an incredible job and a very difficult job governing the sport in this country. And remember all the great things that they've done over the years and the improvements in the medical side. And nobody wants drugs in the sport. Nobody wants problems. But ultimately, sometimes there are, and the board have to be the administrators. They have to be the ones who have no agendas to different fighters or to different promoters or broadcasters or whatever. They have to be the ones that sit in the middle. And it takes me back to 5 weeks ago when Robert said that he felt he had 7 shows, the Friday nights and the Saturday nights, in the wake of what happened with the Queen's passing, that he had to deal with, and the fact that he had to make a decision, and different sports were doing different things, and he along with the board made the decision that the events wouldn't go ahead. He said last week that it was they were prohibiting this fight from going ahead with Eubank and Benn. Obviously the difficulty was the 24 hours or so after that, where would it, wouldn't it, there were other commissions going on. But I think everybody saw sense in the end. The fight didn't happen. Right decision for boxing. And yeah, with any situation that crops up, and it has to be dealt with by the board. That's the most important thing. We're the broadcasters, as I say. There are promoters who obviously are pushing their fighters, and we're pushing the fights to go on if they can go on. But if they can't go on, and there are reasons for them not to go on, that the board say that is not acceptable, then we have to listen to the board, because they are the governing body. And ultimately, it's difficult in boxing because there's so many different boards, around the world. There's the Nevada Commission, the New York Commission. There's so many different ones around the different countries. And sometimes you think, getting them together and having some sort of, universal board, but it's very hard. And the British board, I think, are the best in the world. They've proved it over countless years of administering this sport in a brilliant way in this country. Sometimes there are very bad weeks. Sometimes there are difficult, ones to process for a number of different reasons. And there's a lot of money lost by promoters and fighters, and that's hard. But ultimately, the safety, the health of the athletes, and the right decisions from the administrators have to be made, and that can be really tricky sometimes, but that's what we do. We listen to the board, and when the board allows an event to go on, they allow the event to go on, and we can broadcast it.
Okay, Adam, listen, I'll just kind of finish off on this by asking your opinion, obviously, on Chris Eubank Sr., who was on TalkSport today with Simon Jordan and Spencer. Did you hear his comments today?
I heard some of them, and I heard on, I think, Spencer Fearon's show the other day. Difficult to hear, and he's been through a huge amount, Chris Senior. Obviously, actually, he was one of my heroes when I was a teenager at university. I looked up to Chris. I ended up working with him, and when I worked with him at the end of his career, he'd obviously the Michael Watson event had happened, and I think he looked even at his own performances in the ring in a very different way after that. So, yeah, he's obviously been around tragedy in the sport, and obviously the worst thing that could have happened to him happened last year with the loss of his own son, with Sebastian, which was horrendous. And our hearts have been with the Eubank family all year, and yeah, it's obviously there's a lot of emotion. This is his son Chris, and he's been outspoken about the fight. But obviously, I hope that the Eubank family are well. That's the most important thing. And yeah, it's difficult to hear, I think, at times.
Okay, well listen, Adam, I appreciate your time here at the press conference, and I think for this week we need to focus on kind of the matter in hand, which is a great event as well as the double header from the O2 this week.
Absolutely, you know, Ben Shalom and I have worked really hard with both our teams at Sky and Boxer to put this on. This has been a long time coming. It's a fabulous event. It's an event that's going to make people sit up and take notice, and we're going to get huge eyeballs on it because it's not a box office event, it's free to air. It's going to be seen by all sorts of a different audience. I think the tickets have been bought by 35% women. I think normally it's 5 or 10%, something like that. The stats, I think there's more women fighters here in Britain than there's ever been. I think it's wonderful. Ramla Ali reached out to me yesterday and said, she'd love to bring some of the women from her club, and can we get them there? And I think there's great ideas. I think it's fantastic that we're all trying to give something back. But I will say, in light of what's happened in the last couple of weeks, I do feel for everybody involved, because broadcasters, promoters, managers, trainers and fighters, Coogan, who are the most important here. Ultimately none of us would do this without the fighters, and they are the ones that have my biggest respect for and my biggest admiration for, and it should be about fighters. But everybody lost out last week. It was a very disappointing turn of events, and let's hope we can all move on, and just really gutting, and I hope that boxing's in a good light this week. But I feel for everybody involved, because these things are not easy, and you know that, I know that. There's a lot of politics and agendas behind the scene, but ultimately the board made the right decision, and the health and safety of the fighters come first and foremost, and we should always remember that.
Adam Smith, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to a great week this week.
Thanks, Coogan.
I'm going to share something with you. That might put me in a very negative light, yeah.
Relationships are not my forte.
See if someone grabbed up my wife and saying completely different ballgame.
I'll walk away from here, and this has been like a therapy session.